Hey, Rise of the Resistance. I got an idea. How about an overlay? Let's roll that intro. Rise of the Resistance is a ride that has left many guests clapping, cheering, or even crying. I've witnessed it firsthand. Some even say it is the new standard of dark ride. Well, I said that in my top 10 Disneyland rides video, but shameless plug aside, it really is an attraction that guests still flock to years after its initial introduction to the park. While I think it's a very good attraction, I find that after the first handful of rides, some of the wow factor wears off. Fear not, for I'm here to fix that very issue. Disneyland is not only known for being Walt's park and a theme park full of industry-defining attractions, but it is also known for its overlays or temporary thematic seasonal changes. The two prime examples of this are It's a Small World Holiday and Haunted Mansion Holiday respectively. While there are others, I'm looking at you, Hyperspace Mountain. These two are sort of what inspired this video. Here is my proposal to the Disney executives and Imagineers, who are for sure watching this video. A temporary, yearly re-theme of Rise of the Resistance to an original trilogy overlay called Escape from the Empire. In this video, I shall detail, in broad strokes and minute details, my creative vision. Also, I see this beginning on May 4th and running until early September, allowing for Haunted Mansion Holiday to be in full swing upon its closure. Enough preamble, let's get to it. To help get in the mindset of where I'm coming from, I want to give a brief plot synopsis of Rise. You enter into a resistance base to become a new recruit to fight against the First Order. As you venture forth, you get a transmission from Rey that the base on Batuu is no longer safe, as a Star Destroyer is en route to crush you all. You then board a transport shuttle with Lieutenant Beck and Nyan Num in an attempt to flee before you are captured. Although you are escorted by the one and only Poe Dameron, you and the other would-be recruits are seized by a tractor beam and are forced to board the First Order vessel. After being assigned a color and cell, you are about to be interrogated by Kylo Ren, but after a very convenient call to the bridge taking him and Hux away, you are then saved by some resistance fighters who break into your cell. Boarding a troop transport guided by a disguised R5 droid, you are then whisked back to Batuu, narrowly avoiding death at every turn. My overlay will contain the exact same story beats, but with some tweaks to return it to a story from long ago. Let's begin at the beginning. My version of the overlay would take place between the events of Star Wars: A New Hope and The Empire Strikes Back. The exterior and resistance portion of the queue line would remain largely unchanged. The fighter pilot suits, gear, and weapons would most likely need to be changed out for more era-accurate aesthetics, but other than that, I think the look and feel should suffice for our Rebel base. Our first major change is in the first pre-show room. Instead of BB-8 rolling around, we would get the top half of R2-D2 beep-booping about. As the little astromech goes about his business, a call comes in that we have an urgent message from Princess Leia, who we would swap in for Rey. Mimicking that iconic transmission in some ways from the original Star Wars film, Her Highness would warn us that an Imperial Star Destroyer, infiltrated by Han Solo, is on its way to annihilate the clandestine operation and that we need to evacuate to the Rebel base on Hoth. Leia would then refer you to the ones assisting you off the planet, Nyan Num, still, and Commander Akbar. That's right, he wouldn't be an admiral yet. Akbar lays out the plan before discussing our escort, who is none other than Luke Skywalker himself. Hot off the destruction of the Death Star, Luke appears on screen and is now helping out the rebels any way he can. He tells you he will do everything to keep you safe, and that it's time to go. Moving on outside, we see our next major change, an old-school X-Wing complete with R2 peeking out of the back. This might be tricky as painting and repainting the X-Wing year after year might cause issues. However, I'm confident the Imagineers can find some temporary paneling to make it look like the blockier and tan design from decades ago, complete with fully tubular engines. The transport ship would also need to get a sort of retrofitting too to stay in line with the theme. Once aboard, events play out in the same fashion, but this time with Akbar up front, even utilizing his signature catchphrase, "It's a trap!" once the Imperial ambush begins. After Luke departs our monitors to go summon the Rebel fleet, a stormtrooper takes his place and begins to question us. Lieutenant Akbar attempts to play it cool, much like Lieutenant Beck in the original version of the ride, until an Imperial officer shoves his way under the screen to tell us that we are about to be boarded. Another officer then boards the ship and tells us that the vessel is now under the authority of the Galactic Empire, and that we must disembark to be interrogated. Here's the next major visual change that would need to be made once aboard the Imperial Star Destroyer. The stormtroopers, TIE Fighter, and everything in this portion of the queue would need to revert to the look of the Empire. It might not need be that problematic where the stormtroopers are concerned. The main thing would be their helmets. However, the TIE Fighter would need a bit of extra attention like the X-Wing outside. Also, during this whole time, original Trilogy music would be playing. Perhaps the Emperor's Suite in this portion? As you and the other guests are assigned the cells, the moments play out the same way. An air of tension lingers while officers are mean to you. Finally, once inside your interrogation room, the Imperial officer from before walks in, dismissing the stormtroopers standing guard. He tells you that the rebellion will not be tolerated, and that we will tell him where we were headed as we were being captured. Just then, the officer goes quiet and stands up straight. The truly iconic breath is what we hear first as he steps into frame. Darth Vader is here! He tells us that the resistance is futile, for he is strong in the Force, and that none of us are safe. As he reaches out his hand, the room trembles much the same as when Kylo Ren does it. Ideally, there would also be some sort of wind or fan effect, simulating his Force choke, but I realize that might be Force pushing it a little too far. From here, the officer and Vader depart to the bridge to respond to an emergency right before the rebels bust you out. Once aboard the troop transport, a chunkier and more dated R5 unit would guide us to the escape pods. Before departing, Han Solo would pop up on screen to tell us the outline of the escape. As you can likely tell by now, most of the changes here are relatively superficial. However, I think they would make a huge impact. Progressing through the ride, you slip past an older looking probe droid before running into those original Trilogy stormtroopers. Moving into the hangar containing the AT-ATs or AT-ATs, you might notice their looks have shifted ever so much to that of the ones seen on Hoth in the beginning of Empire Strikes Back. Before ascending in the lifts, a partially disguised Han Solo in stormtrooper armor, taking Finn's place, yells at you that you're going the wrong way and that he isn't getting paid enough for this. Upon dodging either the laser cannons or the laser sentry, depending on which lift you rise up on, you then find yourself sneaking onto the bridge. Up above you is the officer from before standing with Lord Vader. The Sith Lord demands that the shields be raised before the officer questions that order. A moment later, the rebel fleet arrives and Vader remarks that the prisoners have escaped, for he has sensed it. Turning around, he says that there is nowhere in the galaxy you can run. Again, in a perfect world, he would be force choking and levitating the officer next to him out of anger as the transports back up. But as long as Vader is in there, that's all I care about. The Dark Lord of the Sith would then pursue you to the elevator, approaching menacingly as only he can. After feeling the relief of escape while you descend to the level where the escape pods await you, a loud thud rings out above you. A muffled, "I have you now," is heard right before a red blade plunges through the ceiling. Unlike Kylo's, Vader's lightsaber need not spin and retain a shape akin to that seen in the films. Upon exiting the elevator, metal ripping and tearing can be heard behind the transports as Vader seeks another way to catch his quarry. The cannon room that now lies before the fleeing fledgling rebels is once again in full operating order. They fire and move back and forth like they were initially designed to, but I don't think that needs to be an overlay exclusive feature. However, they would also need some more knobs and switches to fit that older style. Once through the final gauntlet, all that is left is one final warning from Han on the screens about the impending exploding Star Destroyer and a confrontation with Darth Vader himself. The 6'7" tall animatronic would grip the transports with the Force, stating that while your escape had been impressive so far, that we couldn't understand the full power of the dark side. In the case of a backup mode, Darth Vader could fly outside the window in a fully repaired TIE Advanced. In either case, a missile shot by Luke's X-Wing would break Vader's grasp on the vehicles, allowing escape back to Batuu. After hitting the surface, Luke would mention how close a call that really was right before Lieutenant Akbar is found in another escape pod nearby. The idea behind this whole overlay is that there is still a supreme love for the original trilogy. Also, I don't want it to be misconstrued that I think those older films have to outright replace the sequel trilogy. However, I think this yearly change-up would really invigorate the ride annually. Not only that, but seeing some of these beloved characters in a newer ride with more modern tech would be powerful. Akbar, Han Solo, and the true legend himself, Darth Vader, as full animatronics would be mind-blowing to fans. On top of that, mixing in that original score from John Williams would be the delicious cherry on top. Making this change wouldn't be simple, I admit, but after seeing the annual transformations of Haunted Mansion and It's a Small World, I'm confident Disney can pull it off. Thank you everybody so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. And as I said in the main part of the video, I'm not saying that we need to completely get rid of Rise of the Resistance. It's just something that I see a lot of these great attractions here in Disneyland especially have these temporary overlays for a certain amount of time. And I think there's always going to be that fervor for the original trilogy, baby. Ugh! And yes, is this all just an excuse to get Darth Vader as a full animatronic in a ride? Kind of. Transparency. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to help this video out, consider liking this or sharing it around. That really does help a ton. And if you're not subscribed yet, please consider it. To all the people who've been subscribed for a long time, thank you so very, very much. If you want to support in an even bigger way, consider supporting the channel financially via the memberships, the join button down here on YouTube, or becoming a patron over on my Patreon. All the links to that are down below, along with other links to donations and stuff. If you want to do that, that helps so very, very much, because thanks to you guys, the more support that I get, the more I can do these types of things. And going forward, we're going to try to put out videos Mondays, Wednesdays, and then stream on Fridays. And then also do a Sunday night stream back home where we're talking about stuff where we can talk about this or other overlay ideas you might have. And if you want to leave some of those down in the comments, I would love to read them, because I love doing these types of videos. I love having these types of discussions. But either way, thank you so very much for watching. And until next time, just remember to adapt and overcome.